to consider as our new president. Eventually the 7 of them draw up a list, and the then incumbent president is asked to go and persuade that person that this is a trivial job. They can do it on the afternoon of Tuesday and just come to lunch on Wednesday. And so that was my job. So David and I had a nice lunch, good bottle of wine. I reserved my fire until the end of lunch, and he was feeling quite good. And I told him, "This is a great honor, David. All you have to do is to say you're willing to do it." And he did. And so, David, I'm delighted to introduce you here today. But after that, you have a 2-year apprenticeship as you sit on the board as president nominee, president-elect, and then president. So you know all the secrets of the club. And that means you actually then can guide the club through its future. And David has taken as his theme to go from good to great. And I hope we hear something about that. Before I introduce David, I notice his birthday is on the 6th of July, but you stopped recognizing people on the 5th of July. You have to do your research, John. So, David, I hope you have a great day, and you and Chris and Nick have a wonderful birthday. So, would you like to come forward? And by the way, I'm not Pilco. I'll do my best. Did you want to say something before we start?
I did.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Frank. Just get these up a bit high. I noticed that the sergeant made a couple of mistakes. He called him Tony instead of Tom. I made a couple of mistakes as well. I wanted to acknowledge a couple of people as well as my guest and at the table and the other guests. And the first one I wanted to acknowledge was immediate past President Peter Neal. What's it like sitting out there, Pete? You enjoying it? Another acronym, I wanted to acknowledge past District Governor Don Sarah, who was my District Governor back in 91-92 when I was President of Regency Park, and he's been a great friend ever since. And also I wanted to, another acronym, PBB, past Big Boss, Mr Mackay. Now I call him Dick, but I didn't in those days, I can tell you that. I just wanted to acknowledge Dick's presence at the table as well. So there may be a number of mistakes that happen as we proceed through the year. I just wanted to say that's okay, doesn't matter. And I'm sure I'm going to make my share of them, and you'll see today. So, and we don't worry about those things. So I just wanted to say that to start, and I'll hand over back to Frank.
I'm sure you referred to Mr. Mackay as Sir, which would have been the proper address in those early days. Well, David, let's find out something about you. Who were your parents? What are your values? Siblings, early schooling, influences on your life?
That's a lot of things to remember, Frank. I always believe that you find a bit out about people when you look at their parents. My parents, my father was an English Army person. He was a gunner in the Second World War. He was stationed on a merchant navy ship and came to Adelaide, and he was here for a week, and he met my mother, who was a local Adelaide girl, and she worked in the health department. She was an actress as a young woman. And they corresponded for 2 years, and as I say, they met in 1944. They married in 1947 in Nairobi in Kenya. They moved on to England for 18 months, and then they came out as 10-pound poms back to Adelaide. 9 months later, I was born as the second of 9 children. So that's my background, where I come from. They moved to the southeast of South Australia, where we lived in Penola, or border town to start with, Penola and Narracourt, and my early schooling was at the the Penola St Mary MacKillop Catholic School. She was there 90 years before I got there, and but it was the same school, so I'm quite proud of that actually. I was only there for a year and a half, and we moved to Narracourt, where I went to the local Catholic convent school, and then on to the high school, where I got a bit of a culture shock to find out there were people that weren't Catholics. And I stayed there till 1965, when I completed my leaving, and I joined the National Bank in 1966. It was my first job. I was actually offered 3 jobs in Narracourt, because Dad was mates with all the bank managers. He was secretary of everything in Narracourt, secretary of the racing club, the trotting club, and the Cowrie Narracourt Football League, and the RSL, and so he knew everybody. But I chose the National. Yeah. Thanks, Dick. Obviously, my values. Frank's asked me to talk a bit about my values. Obviously, I was brought up as a Catholic, and I managed to get that banana that was growing in my ear out by the time I was around about 23, I reckon. I prefer to know myself as a Christian rather than a Catholic these days, because I think that Catholics are a little bit one way. 95% of my friends are Protestants, and including this guy here, who's the national president of the Lutheran Church, and currently the national president of the Council of Churches. Is that right, Mike? So, as I say, 95% of my friends are non-Catholic, and I don't see myself as Catholic, I see myself as Christian. So the values that I think that I really hold dear to are what Grandma taught me. She said it's in giving you receive. I remember telling me that never be afraid to give, and without counting the cost, because the Lord will repay you 1,000 times. I thought that was a pretty good investment actually at the time. And it is certainly something that stuck with me. My father taught me a lot about honesty. After catching me out doing something wrong, I got into big trouble big time, so he drilled that into us. So those 2 values I think are really are large in my life. Right.
Well, David, we know you're a person of values now. How on earth did you join the Port Football Club? And especially since you actually used to play for the Double Blues. So can you tell us a little bit about this transition in your sporting life and your early career with the NAB?
Well, I love tradition and history and success. Look, when I was at Narracourt, the Port Adelaide Footy Club used to come down to Narracourt at the end of the season, and I think it was their end-of-season trip. They were all drunk, looking back on it. But being a starry-eyed young boy, it was sort of like, these are gods. And the Narracourt Football Club used to go for a footy trip to Adelaide at the end of the season, and we always ended up out at Alberton. And I remember winning the meat tray out at Alberton. That was a really big thing on a Sunday in October. And when I got transferred to Adelaide in the bank, Grandma lived at Mitcham, and in those days you had to play football for wherever you lived. And so I was, my uncle had played for Sturt, so I was promptly marched out to Sturt. But my best game, I only played about 3 games. I was a bit of an amateur, to tell you the truth, in the thirds. But my best game was at Alberton, so I thought there's something in that. And then when Port Adelaide finally came into the AFL with black and white and a little bit of blue, I thought there's something in that too. So I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Port supporter for those reasons. Sorry, Frank.
And obviously the NAB had a big influence on life as well. But how did you develop your empathy with people? You know, we know you were an NAB manager, you had a lot of education development, you worked with organisations that looked after vulnerable people like Red Cross and the Salvation Army, notwithstanding your induction into life with the NAB. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Notwithstanding. That's true, actually. The NAB, as Dick would agree, it had a very strong culture. It was very hard-nosed, and you couldn't help but have that rub off on you. But I was brought up in as I said, a large family with 9 children, and I think those, I was pretty sensitive as a child looking back, but I think that you develop empathy as a result of being in a large family, because you've got to share and have lots of hand-me-downs and all the rest of it. But a big factor, I think, in my development occurred when I was around about 25, and I'd done a bit of study and doing quite well on the bank, and they appointed me as a training officer, and across my desk came this flyer to possibly attend a seminar at the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and it was titled Motivating and Developing People. Now, I don't know why I had this interest in people as much, but I suggested to my boss, who was Jack Franklin at the time, as you remember, Dick, who was an old Battle of Britain pilot and had all the old values of the war, you know, the way you led in the war in the old days. But I said to him I'd like to go to this, and I was really surprised he said yes, because it was very expensive. And he said, as long as you give us a report at the end of it. So I gave him a report at the end, and essentially this world-class speaker on leadership was debunking the old command and control style of leadership, and recommending that if companies and businesses were to be successful, that they had to have a more engaging leader who tapped into the motivation of the employees and where they were coming from. And I took it back to Jack Franklin and gave him a paper on it, and he handed it back to me and said, "The bank's not ready for this." So a week later, he went along to a assistant state manager's conference, and he came back and he called me up and he gave me the minutes of the conference, and right through the minutes there was this one particular man that was saying exactly the same things that I'd said in my paper, and his name was Nobby Clark. And Nobby went on to become the CEO of the NAB some years later, and so I was really influenced by those, that is part of my early development, as well as being influenced by the bank and understanding that, you know, businesses have got to be run properly, and having that hard culture. I really had that view on leadership that has stuck with me ever since.
Well, David, you've been in Rotary a long time. Joined Largs Bay Club, then Regency Park, where you were president in 1990, and you joined our club on the 29th of November 2000. What attracted you to Rotary, and what motivated you to actually provide that leadership to the organisations?
Well, I was invited, like most of us, I think. I was manager of Semaphore branch down in Port Adelaide, I think. Mr Mackay might have recognised I was a Port Adelaide person and pointed me down there, and we had a couple of old retired engineers who were my customers, Burnside brothers. Some of them might have known the Burnside boys. They've passed on now, but they invited me to Rotary at Largs Bay. So it appealed to me because the pressure was on to grow the bank's business and networking and all that sort of thing. So that was important. So I joined Largs Bay, as Frank said, went on to Regency Park when Mr Mackay moved me there to harden me up a bit with the business clients. And that's where I met this man. He was president at the time, or a couple of years later, a year or so later. And Mike is one of those style leaders that I was talking about before. He's got an exceptional ability to motivate people and get them to do things that you wouldn't believe. You could run through a brick wall for this fella. We recognised it, didn't we, Don, after he'd been president, and wanted him to be a district governor in Rotary. Rocked up at his church one day at Blair Athol, where he's pastor, and he was quite taken. We had a red, you remember, Mike, and he asked the church, and they said, no, this is not quite right for you, Mike. But within a couple of years, he was the South Australian leader of the Lutheran Church, and then went on for 9 years to be the leader. And what I experienced under his style of leadership, I was the vocational director at one stage, and I was complaining about and telling him about my interest in leadership and telling him how I'd heard this guy, Nobby Clark, speak at, well, not I had heard him, but I'd seen the minutes that he'd produced and how he's about the people. And Mike said, well, we'll get him as a speaker. I said, go away. There's no way I'm getting the CEO of the bank as a speaker at Rotary at Regency Park. He's a glass half full man, and he convinced me that, and we did, we went through a proper agency to get him, but we had a number of national speakers speaking on leadership and engagement, including politicians. Professor Judith Sloan, you'll know, speaking on economics. And we had a marvellous symposium, 250 people. It was a Rotary function, and it was greatly supported by Dick, and a great outcome. And so I found then that being in Rotary was about using your vocation and your vocational interest, and sort of stuck with me ever since. I moved on to after leaving the bank, I ended up being head of human resources in the bank, where I was able to express my interest in people and business. You know, the combination of the two together, both important. Ended up retrenching 100 people. Not proud of that, but that was part of the business. Most of them were glad to go, I got to tell you. They were knocking on the door asking for a retrenchment package, and I'd be happy to refer them to the old financial planner and Rob Falconer over there. So in the end I gave a retrenchment package to myself as well. I left the bank, and I was completing a graduate diploma in human resource management at the time, looking at strategic management and change management. I had to do this because they were going to try and kick me out of the bank, out of the HR department, unless I did the study. So I did that, and it was because of that I got a job at the blood bank, where they were going through a significant change, and I came up with a strategic HR plan looking at all those issues. Salvation Army, yes, 7 years there. I guess it's my values. Both as a business person, they needed someone to focus on business fundraising, and so Barry Noble was the man that opened the door for me there. He was on their advisory board, and so I was able to use my background in business and talking to people and helping them to raise funds. In the end, I found that there was a bit of a disconnect in my... they were very sort of church-focused, and business is very business-focused, and I was the person in between, so I was glad to retire in the end at 62 years of age. So that's Rotary has been wonderful in helping me sort of in my career and going forward.
Thanks, David. Well, now, of course, you're the president and leader of the Rotary Club of Adelaide, and I know that you're developing a slogan of taking us from good to great. Perhaps you could share your vision for what you want to do with our club in the next year. And you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Frank. Well, I handed out a sheet. Most of you should have got a sheet, so I'll just leave it at that, and you can read it when you get home. No, no, Frank's asked me to share my vision, but I want to tell you that it's not my vision, it's your vision. One of my favourite quotes in leadership, I never really understood it until a couple of days ago when I was discussing it with our sergeant, rocket scientist here, in John Hendrickson, who, as you know, is a lecturer in strategic management and leadership. And the quote is from Mahatma Gandhi, "There goes my people. I must follow them, for I am their leader." Oh, I thought that's, intrigued me. I'm meant to be the leader, not a follower. And John said, "Oh, that's because the new way of thinking about leadership, and it fits in beautifully with what I'd learnt before, is that as a leader you're there to watch, to encourage and support, and that all the people, you people in your club, have a vision yourself. You see things from your perspective, and if the leader can tap into that vision and have it all channeling in the same direction. As you know, that's how Rotary started. 4 people sitting around a table, bringing their vocation, each with a different vision of the world, and it was the combination of those visions that made Rotary successful. So this is not my vision, this is your vision, and I just want some of you will know that I've spent the last 6 to 9 months doing vocational profiles because we've got amazing human capital in this club. We've got a long way to go with those. We've only done 60. But what I've learned in the process, the stories of each of these people that we've interviewed, and you can see what they've got to offer in that context. Plus, we've taken a lot of time to quietly listen. We've had a number of, apart from the vocational profiles, a lot of people have said a lot of things, but in the case of, we've had a number of fellowship meetings where we've asked people their views. And those views, and plus a lot of views that Frank started in his year where he picked up a strategic questionnaire and asking people what they like and dislike and what they want. All those things have been taken into consideration and have been, it's not just me, but I've sat down with Darcy and Reg and also Barry Noble and George Horwood, and Rob Thomas is another one that's thrown in his penny's worth. And we've looked at all that information and brought it down to that little piece of paper that we've handed you today. So it reflects the fact that we want this club to go from being a good club to being a great club, but it also reflects some really brutal facts about our membership, which are really quite astounding when you look at them, where we've got 76% of people over 60, 45% are over 80, over 70, and 15% over 80. And only 10% below 50. You don't have to be what were you, Frank? No, not a demographer, an actuary to realise that in 5 years' time, our critical mass could disappear very quickly unless we do something big. So those plans and those objectives are about, helping us to grow. They're about answering what you guys want in terms of having good fun meetings, and about looking at our core economic drivers, our fundraising and what we need to do, and also looking about how we need to communicate. So I'd encourage you to have a read of that in that context, and when you read it, just remember it's not my vision, it's your vision, and I, as a leader, and I'm encouraging the board as leaders to open the way for you to participate in making that happen. That's the vision.
Well, thank you, David, and no doubt throughout the year we will hear more about how that vision is being implemented. But as a club, as well as leadership, we need followership. We need everybody to get behind our president and support the board and our project teams in implementing the plan. So, David, did you want to say any more?
Just one thing, Frank.
Just one thing, okay.
Apart from handing out that piece of paper, we're now going through a process where your directors are taking those concepts down to the chairs and the chairs to their committees to ask what they can do to contribute to what you've said you want to achieve. So that process is happening over the next month or so, and throughout the year I'd like to feed back to you the progress in a transparent way of how we're going. And finally, just one last thing. I'd like to conclude with a quote from Paul Harris, who in 1935, 30 years after Rotary began, said, "This is a changing world. We must be prepared to change with it. The story of Rotary will have to be written again and again." When you look at some of our statistics and everything else, there is a need for change, and I'd like everyone to be a part of it. And there will be some things that come up in the future which might challenge us a bit, but please go with it. Think about the future of Rotary. By the time we reach our 100th in 8 years' time, I think it is, we'd like to see Adelaide Rotary get still a very strong and a great Rotary club. Okay.
Well, thank you, David, for being so open and transparent and sharing your vision for our club and insights into your life. So I would ask you all to stand and thank our President and wish him all the best for the future year.